If you've ever wondered what it actually means when people say Buckingham Palace is priceless, this is where it gets real. We're talking about a building sitting on some of the most expensive land on Earth, crammed with art, jewels, and historic objects worth more than many national museums, run like a self-contained town, and costing tens of millions a year just to stop it falling apart. On paper, real estate experts put its value close to $5 billion. In reality, it's a royal residence that legally can't be sold, can't be inherited like a normal house, and technically belongs to the crown, not the king as a private individual. So let's unpack what's actually inside this place and why Buckingham Palace sits right at the center of the ongoing argument about the modern monarchy. The numbers alone are staggering. The palace complex covers about 39 acres in central London. The main building has 775 rooms, 19 staterooms for official events, 52 royal and guest bedrooms, 188 staff bedrooms, 92 offices, and 78 bathrooms. The facade along the front stretches more than 100 meters, and the ballroom on its own is larger than many people's homes, first used in 1856 to celebrate the end of the Crimean War. There are over 760 windows, which have to be cleaned every 6 weeks, and more than 1,500 doors. Roughly 40,000 light bulbs keep everything lit. Valuers who try to treat Buckingham Palace like a normal property generally land somewhere between £3.1 billion and £3.9 billion for the building and site alone. Once you factor in the contents, the prestige of the location, and its status, most estimates cluster around the $4.9 to $5 billion mark. But here's the catch: you or I could never buy it, even in theory. By law, it is held in right of the crown, meaning it's attached to the institution, not the person. When one monarch dies, it automatically passes to the next. It's not something Charles can quietly sell off, nor something William will ever inherit like a private mansion. It didn't start out this way. Back in 1703, this site held a red brick townhouse called Buckingham House, built for John Sheffield, the Duke of Buckingham, at a cost of about £7,000. King George III bought it in 1761 for Queen Charlotte as a private family home, and for decades it was known as the Queen's House. 14 of their 15 children were born there. The real transformation came under George IV, who wanted something grand enough to rival other European courts. He hired architect John Nash in the 1820s to turn the modest house into a proper palace. The project ballooned from an original £150,000 estimate to nearly £500,000, roughly $1 billion in today's money. Nash's love of spending eventually got him fired, and another architect, Edward Blore, finished the job after George IV died. Even then, the building wasn't the Buckingham Palace we think of today. Queen Victoria made it the official royal residence in 1837 and was the first sovereign to process to a coronation from there in 1838. She soon realized it was too small for court life and added a fourth wing in 1847, part funded by selling the Royal Pavilion in Brighton for £53,000. The now iconic East Front, with its familiar Portland stone facade and the central balcony, only appeared in its modern form in 1913 after a refacing overseen by Sir Aston Webb. That balcony, first used by Victoria during the Great Exhibition in 1851, has since become the backdrop for coronation flypasts, royal weddings, jubilees, and national celebrations. The palace took real damage in the Second World War. Between 1940 and 1945, 9 German bombs hit the site, one of them destroying the private chapel. George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Mother, famously refused to leave London, inspecting the damage themselves. Her remark, "Now I can look the East End in the face," after the bombings summed up the symbolism, the royal family sharing in the capital's suffering. Today, Buckingham Palace is both an office and a home. Over 800 staff are employed there. More than 50,000 people a year are invited through those ornate gates for state banquets, investitures, receptions, and 3 massive garden parties
parties each summer. Each garden party can host up to 8,000 guests at a time and involves roughly 20,000 sandwiches on its own. But the building itself is only half the story. What's hanging on the walls and locked in cabinets is on another level entirely. The Royal Collection, spread across royal residences, but with a huge concentration in Buckingham Palace, is one of the largest and most valuable art collections in the world. It includes over 1 million items: paintings, sculptures, tapestries, furniture, porcelain, clocks, musical instruments, jewels, armor, and historically significant objects amassed by monarchs over centuries. At a broad level, it's estimated at around £10 billion, or about $12.5 billion. Technically, it isn't the king's personal property. Like the palace, it's held in trust for the nation. Just a few examples make it clear why art historians drool over this collection. There are Vermeers, including A Lady at the Virginals with a Gentleman, and The Music Lesson, acquired in the 18th century and now considered masterpieces of the Dutch Golden Age. There's a moving Rembrandt dual portrait, The Shipbuilder and His Wife, painted in 1333. Italian Renaissance giants like Raphael, Titian, and Michelangelo are represented. Rubens and Van Dyck bring dramatic Baroque flair. Canaletto's views of Venice hang in long galleries, offering windows into 18th century cityscapes. In sculpture, Antonio Canova's white marble group Mars and Venus and his famous Three Graces stand out, the former gifted to the future George IV as a symbol of peace after the Napoleonic Wars. They sit among neoclassical busts and statues that make some rooms feel more like a Roman gallery than a British palace. Furniture tells another story of taste and power. In the Green Drawing Room, you'll find Parisian cabinets by Adam Weisweiler with intricate botanical marquetry, pure Louis XVI elegance. Elsewhere, you see George IV's love of lacquer and chinoiserie. Much of it moved from Brighton Pavilion when that exotic fantasy palace was sold off. Porcelain ranges from English manufacturers to French Sèvres pieces, including a lavish green potpourri vase once bought by Madame de Pompadour. The Table of the Great Commanders of Antiquity, made in the early 1800s, is a circular Sèvres showpiece whose top is painted with miniature portraits of ancient generals, framed in golden mounts. Even the functional pieces carry history. The early 19th century astronomical clock bought by George III doesn't just tell the time, it tracks the movements of the planets, moon phases, calendars, and tide times for dozens of ports, a mechanical snapshot of Enlightenment science. Queen Victoria's gilt Erard piano still sits in the White Drawing Room, looking more like a piece of sculpture than an instrument. Then there are the one-off treasures, a 17th century Japanese samurai armor gifted to James I by the Tokugawa shogunate, representing early contact between England and Japan. The Royal Philatelic Collection, built up by George V, is itself worth around £100 million. One imperial Fabergé egg in the collection, the 1914 Mosaic egg, is estimated at roughly $20 million alone, decorated with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds, and containing miniature portraits of the doomed Romanov children.
On top of that sits a separate, more private royal art collection, personally owned by the monarch, rather than held in trust, including works by Monet and L.S. Lowry. That private side is harder to value and raises interesting questions about where state gift ends and personal property begins. All of this sits inside a building that, behind its grand receptions, functions like a sealed-off village. Most visitors never see the infrastructure that keeps this place running. There's a private swimming pool built in the 1930s, a small cinema, an in-house medical surgery, and even its own post office operated by Royal Mail. Down in the basement, there's an ATM so discreet that staff joke you could withdraw cash without ever technically leaving home. Timekeeping in the palace is almost a full-time department. Around 350 clocks and watches need to be wound and maintained every week by specialist horologists. There's a fender maker who looks after all the fireplaces and their fittings, a flag sergeant who raises and lowers the royal standard and union flags with ceremony, and a jeweler on site to repair tiaras, brooches, and orders that have been worn by generations of royals. The palace was one of the earliest major buildings in London to embrace electricity. The ballroom was wired in the 1880s. Today, beneath all that tradition, the mechanical and electrical systems are a patchwork of different eras. Under the foundations, things get even stranger. One of London's lost rivers, the Tyburn, still flows underground from Marylebone to the Thames. It runs right beneath the front courtyard and south wing, but now it's part of the capital's sewer system. There's a small but serious group, the Tyburn Angling Society, who dream of reopening sections of the river to daylight. To do that under Buckingham Palace would mean literally tearing up part of the site, so those plans remain fantasy. Rumors of secret tunnels have swirled for decades. People talk about hidden passages leading to Whitehall, Parliament, Clarence House, or even connecting with the old underground post office railway. The palace never confirms these stories, but one wartime anecdote about George VI and the Queen Mother stumbling across a homeless man living in hidden basement areas has only fueled those legends. Outside, the 39-acre gardens form the largest private garden in London, essentially a private park hidden behind walls in one of the most expensive cities in the world. There's a lake, a helipad, a tennis court, sprawling lawns, ancient trees, and more than 350 species of wildflowers, plus dozens of bird species nesting there. Helicopters have been landing on the lawn since at least the 1950s, and in 2000, a reinforced grass landing area was installed to avoid tearing up the turf. The garden also holds the UK's national collection of mulberry trees, around 40 varieties in total. That isn't random. Back in 1609, James I tried to kickstart a homegrown silk industry and ordered a mulberry garden planted for silkworms. Unfortunately, he chose black mulberries, which silkworms don't favor, instead of the white variety they need. The plan failed, but one original 17th century tree still survives and still produces fruit. In earlier centuries, the grounds were more like a royal menagerie. Henry VIII had deer there for hunting. James I kept camels and even crocodiles. Queen Charlotte had elephants and a zebra. In the Victorian era, Queen Victoria herself famously rode P.T. Barnum's elephant Jumbo around the grounds when he visited. For all the security, there have been some notorious breaches. In the 19th century, a teenager known as the Boy Jones managed to break in multiple times, stealing food, apparently trying on Queen Victoria's clothes, and even sitting on her throne. In 1982, Michael Fagan famously got into Queen Elizabeth II's bedroom and reportedly spoke to her before he was detained, highlighting serious weaknesses in palace security at the time. You also get the usual ghost tales with a building this old. People speak of a chained monk from a former monastery appearing at Christmas, and of the sorrowful presence of a Victorian official who died by suicide. Whether you believe any of that or not, the myths cling to the building. Then there's the part of Buckingham Palace that almost no one outside the inner circle will ever see properly: the private apartments. The King's and Queen's main living quarters are in the north wing, looking out over the gardens and across to Constitution Hill. It's estimated there are around 25 rooms making up the monarch and consort suites, plus antechambers, smaller sitting rooms, and staff accommodation. Like the glittering staterooms, these spaces are deliberately more low-key. Think polished wooden floors, cream sofas, traditional but not overdone fireplaces, side tables with lamps, family photos, and discreetly displayed gifts from foreign visits. The audience room, where the king holds his weekly meetings with the prime minister, is a good example of the tone. Pale blue walls, classical furniture, portraits from the royal collection, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. The layout hasn't changed dramatically since the mid-20th century, when interior designer John Fowler gave it its current, refined, uncluttered look. The East Wing refurbishment, completed recently and opened in part to the public, gives more hints. Chinese-style decor inherited from Brighton Pavilion, intricate hand-painted wallpapers from Qing China, and period clocks like the famous Kailin clock. These private spaces have evolved. Old photographs from Victoria's time show fussy drapes, heavily patterned carpets, canopied beds, and crowded mantelpieces. Modern royals tend to prefer less visual noise and more practicality. When Charles III finally moved in, he is believed to have funded some personal adjustments out of his own pocket,
but the specifics are kept very quiet. Of course, maintaining all of this is not cheap, and this is where the politics really kicks in. The monarchy's official work is funded through the sovereign grant, a yearly sum calculated as a percentage of Crown estate profits. For 2024 to 25, the grant was £86.3 million, with net spending of about £85.2 million. That money covers property upkeep across multiple royal residences, staff salaries, utilities, travel for official duties, and the cost of hosting state events. Property maintenance alone across all occupied royal palaces ran to about £41.2 million that year, down slightly from the previous year. Around £22.6 million of that went directly on Buckingham Palace's massive refurbishment project. Staff pay came to £34 million for the equivalent of 539 full-time workers. Utilities, heating, electric, water swallowed another £6 million. Hospitality and housekeeping cost around £3.2 million. Official travel cost about £4.7 million. When you break it down, the cost to each person in the UK is generally estimated between about 77 pence and £1.65 a year, depending on how you calculate it. The single biggest line item right now is the decade-long resurfacing program at Buckingham Palace. Parliament signed off on a £369 million budget in 2017 to rip out and replace wiring, plumbing, and heating that in many cases hadn't been fully updated since the 1950s. By March 2025, around £270 million of that had been spent, about 72% of the work complete. The National Audit Administration monitors this closely every year. The idea is to make the palace safe and functional for another 50 years, reduce fire risk from old electrics, prevent catastrophic pipe bursts, and cut carbon emissions by installing more efficient systems, including some solar panels. The money comes from a temporary increase in the percentage of Crown estate profits used to calculate the sovereign grant, from 15% to 25%, a change that is scheduled to end in 2027 once the heavy lifting is done. The Crown estate itself is not the royal family's private property. It's a huge commercial portfolio of land and assets worth over £6 billion that belongs to the state. Its profits, £1.1 billion in 2024, go mostly to the Treasury. The sovereign grant is a slice of those profits. To offset some of the costs, the palace has been open to paying visitors since the early 1990s. Summer tours of the staterooms began as a way to help fund repairs at Windsor Castle after the 1992 fire, and have continued ever since. Tickets start at just over £30 for adults, and in 2024 to 25, around 683,000 people visited the staterooms. The newly opened East Wing tours sold out quickly, drawing more than 10,000 visitors in their first weeks. Visitor income for the royal collection as a whole reached about £21.5 million, with total income, including retail, around £98.9 million. Net income was £13.9 million, and the trust reported reserves of £8.3 million. All of this is published annually and open to public scrutiny, and that feeds into a bigger national argument. One side sees Buckingham Palace as a cultural asset and economic engine. It draws millions of tourists to London every year, who don't just buy tickets, they fill hotels, restaurants, and shops. For them, spending a relatively small amount per person to keep it standing and safe is a fair price for the heritage and soft power it generates. The other side questions whether in a modern democracy with stretched public services, it's right to pour hundreds of millions of pounds into preserving such an opulent symbol of monarchy. They ask whether the institution justifies the cost and whether some of the Crown's property should be repurposed or its funding model changed. That's the tension Buckingham Palace sits in every day. It is at once a working office of the head of state, a family home, a tourist attraction, an art museum, a historic landmark, and a political lightning rod. What's beyond doubt is the scale. 775 rooms spread across